You know what we're taught to do when something goes wrong? Call the police. They're the ones who show up when nobody else will. The ones trained to handle the worst. But what if even they don't have answers? Tonight, I'm going to tell you 3 real horror stories. Stories where people reached out for help, desperate, terrified, and the police came but walked away just as confused, just as scared. Not because they didn't want to help, but because what they saw didn't make sense. A young woman kept hearing footsteps in her apartment every single night, but every time the police came, nothing. Then there's the father who noticed strange things in the woods behind his house. His daughter was the only one who could really see what was out there, and what she described still haunts him. And the last one? A man who captured something on video so disturbing, the sheriff told him to destroy it and never speak of it again. These aren't stories from old legends. These are real people, real fear, and cases that were never explained. Not by the police, not by anyone. So if you're home alone, maybe lock your doors, turn off the lights, and get comfortable, because these stories, they stay with you. If you're into real horror stories that get under your skin, go ahead and like this video. It really helps the channel grow. Share it with someone who loves this creepy kind of stuff. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more true horror every single week. Let's get into it. It was supposed to be a fresh start. Emily had just moved into a small studio apartment downtown. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. Her first real place alone. A clean slate after a rough breakup and years of roommates. The building was old, but the rent was cheap and the location was perfect. She even told her friends, "This place feels like a reset." But almost immediately that feeling changed. The first few nights were quiet. Too quiet. Until the 4th night, when she woke up at 3:12 a.m. to the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, not from upstairs, from inside her apartment. She froze in bed, her breath caught in her throat. She waited, listening. Nothing. No more steps. She told herself it had to be from the hallway, maybe thin walls. She tried to brush it off, but it kept happening. Every night, always around the same time. First footsteps, then whispering, low, almost like someone humming through their teeth. Then knocking, not on her door, inside the walls, sometimes from the closet. By the end of the 2nd week, she called the police. They were kind, professional. They checked the windows, the locks, the hallway cameras. Nothing. No signs of anyone entering or leaving. They even offered to come back if she ever felt unsafe again. She did call them back, 2 more times. Each time the same thing. No evidence, no explanation. Might be the pipes, one officer offered. Old buildings make weird noises at night. Emily knew it wasn't the pipes. So one night, she decided to record it. She placed her phone on the nightstand, hit record, and tried to sleep. What she heard the next morning made her blood run cold. Breathing, not snoring, not hers, something else. Heavy, slow, almost right next to the mic, like someone standing over her bed. And at one point, a quiet shuffle. Then a creak, like the closet door opening just slightly. She called the police again, shaking. This time they came faster. 2 officers stood in her apartment while she played the recording. One of them asked, "This was from last night?" She nodded. The other officer went to the closet and opened it. Empty. But the moment he did, they all heard it. Breathing. Soft. Just for a second. Then it stopped. The officers exchanged a look. They didn't check the walls. They didn't joke about pipes this time. One of them pulled Emily aside and quietly said, "You need to leave this apartment. Tonight if you can." They didn't file a report. They didn't explain. She packed her bags that night and she never went back. It started with a flicker in the backyard. Ben and Alyssa had just moved into a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Portland. Tree-lined streets, friendly neighbors, a big backyard for their dog. It was the kind of place where nothing ever really happened. Until one night, while washing dishes, Alyssa glanced out the kitchen window and saw someone standing at the edge of the yard. Just standing there. Motionless. She called for Ben. By the time he got to the window, whoever it was gone. He walked out back, checked the gate, the bushes, even shined a flashlight around. Nothing. Not even footprints. They chalked it up to a prank, maybe a teenager messing around. But the next night, the motion sensor light snapped on again. Exactly at 2:41 a.m., Alyssa sat up in bed and checked the camera feed from her phone. Just static, glitching, then black. She woke Ben. They went outside together this time. No one. The grass wasn't even disturbed. They installed new security lights, better cameras, called the police who agreed to do a patrol. The officers found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, no indication anyone had been there at all. One of them even suggested it might be a deer. Happens more than you think, he said. But Alyssa knew what she saw. Then came the night that broke. She was alone, standing in the hallway mirror, brushing her hair. The lights were low, the house silent. That's when she saw him, not in front of her, but behind her. In the reflection of the window across the room. A man, tall, thin, his head tilted slightly, just watching. She turned around in a panic. Nothing, but the dog was growling, low and steady, staring toward the window. She called the police again, this time with shaking hands. They came, reviewed the security footage from earlier that night. Most of it was clean, but one clip just before the motion light triggered showed something. A shape. A dark figure at the edge of the yard, half obscured by the tree line. Faint at first, then clearer for a few seconds, until it blurred, glitched, and faded out completely, like smoke being sucked back into the shadows. The officer didn't have much to say. He took down a few notes, nodded slowly, then said the words they'd both been dreading. There's much more we can do. No arrests, no answers. The file marked as closed. Ben put the house up for sale 2 weeks later. And Alyssa? She still won't look in mirrors after dark. After the divorce, Jack just wanted peace. For himself and for his daughter Lily. He found a quiet little rental just outside a sleepy town in upstate New York. A modest house, backed by thick woods that stretched for miles. It felt safe. Still, a good place to heal. At first, Lily seemed to love it. She'd spend hours outside, twirling through the backyard, staring into the trees. Jack would watch from the porch, sipping coffee and thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd be okay. Then came the whispers. It started with Lily talking to herself more than usual. Jack assumed it was just imaginary friends, common for a 6-year-old. But one evening she came inside and asked, "Daddy, who lived here before us? The little boy in the woods wants to know if I sleep in his old room." Jack froze. He hadn't told her anything about the house's history. Heck, he didn't even know who had lived there before them. Still, he laughed it off. "Tell your friend the room is all yours now." Lily smiled. "He knows. He just doesn't like the basement." That night she had her first nightmare. She screamed so loud it jolted Jack out of bed. He ran to her room, found her trembling under the covers, eyes wide and soaked in tears. She said she saw a man, tall, standing by the tree line. But he didn't have eyes, she whispered. The nightmares got worse. So did her conversations with the woods. She told Jack one day that the boy's name was Michael, that he used to live here, that he went missing a long, long time ago because the man in the woods told him to play hide and seek. Jack didn't want to believe it. But curiosity got the best of him. One night he Googled missing children plus town name. And there it was, Michael Hensley, age 7. Vanished from the very property they now lived on 21 years ago. Never found. Jack went to the police the next morning. They listened, politely, but didn't take him seriously. No new evidence, and they said. Kids say weird things. Even after he begged them to search the woods again, nothing. They sent 2 officers out, walked the perimeter, came back empty-handed. That night, Lily screamed again. Jack rushed and found her pointing toward the window. "He's closer now," she sobbed. "He wants me to hide next." Jack didn't wait for another night. They left the house before sunrise, never packed a thing. Just drove until the trees were gone. From the rearview mirror, the case of Michael Hensley remains unsolved. And Lily, she still won't go near the woods. Brian never believed in the supernatural. He was a practical man, Retired military, turned machinist, recently settled into a quiet farmhouse outside Helena, Montana. The place was old but sturdy, with a wide porch and a basement that creaked, a little too often for his liking. Still, he told himself it was just the house settling, until the noises started. At first it was faint, a soft shuffle in the basement around 2 or 3 a.m. He assumed it was a raccoon, maybe mice. He set traps. Nothing, but the noises grew louder. He'd wake to thumps, dragging sounds, and once, something that sounded like breathing. Wet, raspy breathing. One night he walked down with a flashlight and his old 9mm, heart pounding. But the basement was empty. Still, the air felt wrong. Like the moment before a thunderstorm. Too still. Too heavy. So Brian set up a camera. Not just any camera. A motion-triggered night vision recorder with a backup battery. He aimed it at the furnace, the darkest corner of the room, where the sounds always seemed to come from. He didn't expect to find anything, but when he reviewed the footage the next morning, his hands went cold. At 3:17 a.m., the furnace rattled. Then something moved behind it. Not a rodent, not a person. Something small and gray, jointed wrong, as if its limbs had been broken and reassembled backward. It pulled itself out from the shadows, hunched and twitching. No eyes, no face. Just folds of skin and a mouth that opened far too wide. It stood in the middle of the basement for a full minute, then turned its head, slowly, toward the camera, and smiled. Brian slammed the laptop shut. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning he took the footage to the county sheriff, an old man named Harrow, who'd served longer than most deputies had been alive. Brian expected disbelief. Instead, the sheriff watched the clip in silence. His face drained of color. When it ended, he didn't speak for a long time. Finally, Harrow stood up and locked the door to his office. "I'm going to say this once," he said. "Erase it. Now." Brian stared at him. "You saw what I saw. We should—" "No," the sheriff snapped. "You don't understand. Things like that, they don't want to be seen. You show this around, they'll know. You're not ready for what comes after." When Brian hesitated, the sheriff leaned in, eyes cold and flat. "Some things," he whispered, "aren't meant to be kept, or believed, or survived." Brian left without another word. He never shared the footage, but he also never erased it. He keeps it on a flash drive, locked in a drawer, and he hasn't gone into the basement since. It happened just after midnight. Erin lived alone in a small rental on the edge of town, one of those one-story places built in the 80s with thin walls and creaky floors. She was used to the house making sounds at night, the refrigerator groaning, pipes settling, the usual things you tell yourself when you're trying to fall asleep, but that night was different. She woke up suddenly, not to a noise, but to the feeling of being watched. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of her phone charging on the nightstand. And that's when she saw him, a figure, standing at the foot of her bed. She didn't scream, didn't move. Her brain refused to catch up. She reached for her phone, eyes locked on the shape in the dark, and dialed 911 with shaking fingers. The dispatcher picked up immediately. Erin whispered her address and said someone was in her room. But before she could say more, the dispatcher interrupted, her voice trembling. "Ma'am, who else is on the line with us?" Erin froze. "What?" "We're hearing whispering," the dispatcher said. "Right now, but you're the only one speaking." Erin swore she was alone. But the whispering continued, faint but persistent, like dozens of voices murmuring just beneath the signal. The dispatcher said officers were on the way. Erin stared at the figure, still unmoving. Then, in a blink, it was gone. The police arrived minutes later. No sign of forced entry, no footprints, all doors and windows locked from the inside. They did a full sweep, checked the attic, even looked under the bed. Nothing. They told her it was probably a hallucination. Stress. Night terrors. But the calls didn't stop. Over the next week, 911 received 4 more calls from her number. All in the middle of the night. In one of them, the dispatcher heard heavy breathing and sobbing. Another had the same whispers as before, unintelligible, but rhythmic. Erin swore she hadn't made those calls. She showed them her call log. Her phone never rang out. Then came the final call. It was 2:14 a.m. The dispatcher answered, expecting a prank or static. Instead, they heard Erin, screaming, panicked, raw, guttural, like she was fighting for her life. Then, a sharp thump and static. When officers arrived, Erin was safe. Sitting silently on her porch. She had no memory of calling, no memory of screaming. She said she'd been asleep. That was the last night she spent in that house. She moved out the next morning. No one ever figured out what really happened inside. Those walls. The number was flagged in the system, but the calls stopped. Sometimes, when you're in real danger, even 911 can't help. If you felt a chill just now, you're not alone. There are more stories just like this one. Darker, deeper, more disturbing. So don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more real horror stories, and hit the bell, so you don't miss what comes next. Because sometimes the scariest thing of all is knowing no one's coming to save you.